All right. Good evening. This is Dr. Kyle Hulsebus, your chiropractor, health and human potential specialist. We're speaking to you today from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm here today with my friend Brett Bauer. Brett is a former principal dancer for the ballet.
Yep.
He's practiced ballet for many years. He's been around the world. I came down here to study a little bit with Brett. I'm not here to do ballet, though we did some ballet motions. I came here to further my education about my body and my spine because no longer being with a ballet company, he's now with his wife. They are now teachers of body motion. They use something we call the gyrotonic method, something that they've been certified in that uses this theory of gyrokinesis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so knowing what we know, we start off because I obviously speak on health. And when I talk to people about health, if you've listened to me before, I talk about the etymology of the word. It's an Old English word. And health comes to us from Old English, very much unchanged, but it means very a state of or a condition of wholeness. And when we use it in physiology in the human body and chiropractic, the definition is it's a state of wholeness in which all the organs of the body function together at 100%, 100% of the time. And that's how we present it. Meaning, in order to have health, you really only need two things. You need to have 100% of the parts, and they need to function 100% of the time. And so when I came to study, most of the time when I'm working on that axis, that axial skeleton of the spine to make sure all the nerves and neurology in the body works in harmony, is to make sure I've got that full function. And if obviously as a chiropractor, making sure the spine is functioning at that level. Now in gyrotonic, as we were discussing, if we break those words down, we have that idea of gyration, that round rotational element to it, but at the same time, tonic, we have a tone. And we were talking about Buckminster Fuller's idea of tensegrity.
Yeah.
And so people that don't know our Buckminster Fuller, hey, if you're in Illinois like I am, you know that Fuller, he was a professor down at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, very well-known man. He was a brilliant mind, brilliant scientist. His idea of tensegrity we use in chiropractic as well in all systems. But what we're trying to do with that is have this idea that where we use tone, tonicity, tonic, and we have that measure, that balance of laxness, so that you can always have strong strength, but at the same time flexibility.
Yeah.
And I think when we get into gyrotonic, you've got that.
Correct.
And in that idea of gyrokinesis, then we've got the kinesis part, the kinetic energy, not the potential. So that motion is there because when does your body stop?
Yeah. Seamlessness is the goal. So as you're moving through it, if you don't lose the connection in either direction, then you find a fluidity that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Nice.
You find a little rigidity if you're imbalanced one side or the other. And so you want to find that little happy place in between where everybody's settled in and comfortable.
Yeah. That's where we don't want to slouch like you and I are right now.
Exactly.
At the table. So
probably a chair thing.
Well, we got the. So yeah. I remember when we worked earlier today, there was a beautiful flow because at no point do we really stop, even in sleep. Obviously systems are working.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that's definitely that piece. But how would we apply that then? Say thinking about doing some practice like that in our daily life. How would that apply?
Well, the idea is we're moving in three-dimensional space always, right? We can't help that. That's just the way we are. So if you're training yourself in a linear way, or just one-sided or one set of muscles, you're not going to really get the full picture in the same way you're going to move your body in space. So the idea is to find that three-dimensionality and fill up as much space as you can while still staying really connected at the core. Yeah. Just fill up your kinesphere as much as humanly possible without losing your position.
So real simple thing, you go out and walk the dog. How do you, then we're getting into our philosophy ideas of being connected with the world around us.
Right.
So I go out and walk the dog. And that's just like strolling along, letting the dog do its thing. Let my mind wander to the next soap opera.
Yeah.
So there's a mental component.
Yeah. And really what you want to be doing is finding your rhythm through whatever you're doing and make sure you're feeling balanced while you're doing this action, and connect with the floor is pretty much the biggest thing, because if you're able to push into the floor to get lengthened, then you've got a little more connection and tensegrity in your length rather than disconnecting from the floor and lifting everything up. It's a down to go up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bouncing
opposition.
bouncing the ball down to make it bounce higher.
Yeah. When I talk to a lot of patients, when they're talking about, how should I work on the posture of my spine? I go, well, one of the things you want to think about when you sit is allowing your spine to elongate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but we still want to have curves in there.
Exactly.
And so that whole structure's got to come up, because a lot of people think I got to be back or forward, but it's that lengthening that you see too.
And for instance, walking, you're going to get that opposition. And so the spiral that we're always working on in gyrotonic, whatever plane your body is in or your upper body is in, the oppositional forces need to be equal so that you've got a nice little bounce into your next step. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we work with, if I work with somebody that's got neurological issues, they won't have the opposition. The left arm moves with the left leg, and suddenly you see that stiffness. So probably one thing, even if they can't work with somebody like you, like an easy thing to think about is even just when you walk, can you think about your body mechanics a little bit, the way you step, the way you move, in order, just like, because now we're getting back to that idea, well, you got the parts, there's no doubt. Now we've got a functional issue. So you're really working with that functional piece, that motion, that constant gyro
and momentum. Really is the other thing, because in order to make something seamless, you've got to carry it through with the same power you started with. And so you can take steps where you're really aggressively stepping forward, but you're not in the center of your own plumb line and your balance moving in space.
Yeah.
So as simple as how you're making contact with the ground on the planting foot, and then whether you're pulling yourself forward or pushing yourself forward, there should be a balance between the two so that you're supported both ways. And just connecting with the ground. That's the biggest thing. We feel like we live above this terrestrial world and everything below is not there, but we have to send our shock waves below the ground. Yeah, deeper than that.
And that's how you make walking the dog into a powerful spiritual exercise.
Exactly.
So so we can get it, that'd be a lot of fun as far as that goes, because the more we're in touch with our body and the more we can be aware of how it moves in space, that's going to allow us to connect a little more deeper. And we'll get metaphysical here now, is we can get deeper into our spiritual self. And, because the way we talk in chiropractic often, if you don't know, is we talk about, it's not just the matter, it's not just the physical person we need healthy. We find the reason we end up seeing a lot of people that have a lot of different conditions go on is the pinched nerve in the spine, the misalignment, the subluxation, we call it, is that will start to affect the way your mind works. And so we get to a point where we adjust, and we'll have people have emotional releases and things like that. Not often, but we see so many other components than just, my back hurts, this hurts, which can be solved with exercise. But now suddenly I've got the matter and the mind. And they used to say you need both mind and matter in order to have full health, because we need all the parts. Exactly. Because health is parts and function.
And I would also mention gyrotonic, the concept, the root of the concept is from the inside out. So even though on the outside it's an exercise, it's really an exercise of understanding the very first moment of connection, and then that trickles out into the rest of your body, into your extremities.
And you start with the spine.
And as a dancer, we try to think about the shape we're trying to make and get there and hold it. But there's a tightness, there's a stiffness to that kind of just keeping it there. And you can build the strength to do so, but it's not going to be comfortable or pleasant to the point where you can get your body to enjoy that position. That it's solid. And the only way to do that is to have it come from the inside out, and then incrementally work your way into that range.
Well, we talk about it in chiropractic. There's this very famous saying, health is from above down, inside out. And so it's always, most of the time when we look at things as chiropractors, whether it be in business, family, physical body, relationships, your work, finance, somewhere internal to where it goes. I think, you and I have done, enough studies in like financial principles, and they usually say, what's your mindset? It's the inside,
Yeah.
and you
Self-worth.
go read all these books, and the first thing they tell you is you got to make sure you got your mental game going.
Big time.
How many athletes go work on mindset every day?
Yeah, and when they're struggling, it's usually because they're in a place where they're not switched on in the same way they were, like Tiger Woods with all of his
Tiger Woods had tons
personal
of stuff.
struggles, and until then it was an unbreakable will that he was not going to fail, and he was just gonna mop the floor with everybody.
Well, then, I think a lot of people saw that documentary about the Bulls and with Michael Jordan, and he talked about how he created the challenge mentally for himself of somebody always to be. So all those little pieces were in there. So there. So you were,
but even in that, it's the desire from deep inside his brain that's then pushing its way out of his body and into the rest of his body and then out to the world.
Right.
So it had to start from somewhere in a very meaningful place for him, and then there's no stopping him. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now you work with kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see a difference in the way kids approach this type? Do you see a more natural sort of tonicity and tensegral structure in a kid than you do in an adult?
Well, I do notice that the just the natural playfulness allows for more fun while it's occurring. So it's sort of it's a playtime, and really the creator was talking about how that you want to let kids play on it a little bit, because everything is play. Life is play. And when you get a new kitten, it has to play to get strong enough to understand how to move fast, how to be coordinated. And if you don't get those kind of reps, you're not going to get it. You can't just learn it. You got to go through the process.
Yeah, that sort of cybernetic mechanism in your brain that we've got, like when you watch a baby learn to walk.
Right.
He's up, he doesn't quite know the tone of his legs, down he goes.
Yeah.
And if we just carry him all the time,
he's never going
to have that tonicity. And so they've got to have the falls, they've got to do the development. We got to let it kind of develop.
Yeah.
So that whole principle then that's going to apply. So you think when I'll go speak to businesses, and I'll talk about, keeping health of the business, but business is what? It's a corporation. And of course, a corporus is body from Latin. And so, every business is some type of body. So obviously it's going to work off the health. It needs the parts, it needs the function. So where, if we look at that, then that same idea of that playfulness, could we do that in a company per se? Maybe not a large one at first, but think a small business, to where they can kind of play with those systems in order to do that, rather than worry. I think they get real rigid. They talk about when you get real anal with one thing.
Well, if it becomes more fun, people are probably more likely to achieve because they're interested.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a grind.
It's kind of like having the employees engaged in the business because it's something they value.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're playing, it's a game. You're not going, why do I have to go into work? You're happy to go into work.
You're going in, you go, ooh, what do we get to do today?
Yeah, exactly. What problem are we going to solve? And
that's usually, most people want to be of service.
Yeah.
And so, this is part of what I think you and I have in common is we're both trying to keep people physically moving. But, the underlying aspect that we look at, and I think a lot of people do in their different businesses, is what, how is that going to affect my life, my spiritual pursuits more than anything?
Yeah.
How, so we can come do gyrotonic, we can get our spine, our body moving. So we're trying to align spines and minds with the divine.
Yeah.
And have our body going. So getting that into, doesn't matter. I think you see some elderly people.
We do.
Yeah. And they're not doing it so that they can do the Olympics.
Certainly not. But their Olympics is just getting up and down all the time throughout their life, and living as comfortably as possible.
Yeah.
And so anybody can make progress in a direction where they're more capable, with the right intention and the amount of practice.
Have you ever met anybody that doesn't need to do some type of regular care to themselves?
No, I don't think so.
So
whether or not they're doing it right, but I don't think.
But even getting to the point where you can do simple stuff, you always see.
Yeah.
So, it's always, and it doesn't matter whether it's a company. I mean, there's always, we're both married,
Mhm.
not to each other.
Right.
But the fact that, a relationship is the same type of thing.
Mhm.
There's always that give and take you have on there, that tonicity that, you kind of go around each other. And you have tension, you have relaxation, you've
Yeah.
got lots of little pieces in that, and it's the same type of principle.
Yeah. And
So
gyrotonic in the opposition is the same way. If
right.
your relationship, when everyone's happy, is here and you're balanced, and then you pull yourself out of balance, you just need to know that you have that exact amount of force going the other way, and it's gonna,
We're back to
and then
internal.
you're back in the center.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And so it's
So
always about, we were talking about Aikido earlier,
Mhm.
and it's just about moving around a calm center.
Mm.
And I don't know if a lot of people, I've seen ballet. I'm certain you've seen ballet.
Many.
So you always notice that in a lot of the major dancers. I mean, there's certainly a center they're working around, so you have great balance.
Usually that's what's most impressive when you're watching it on stage as well. Like we have tricks where we leave our arms up longer than our jump actually occurs, and it gives the impression of us jumping higher than we are, because your center of mass does a little trick to the eye, and so it looks more impressive.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like to say we're magicians in a way, because we're trying to defy the laws of physics, at least in somebody else's perception of us. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's able to be trained as long as you're diligent.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of time.
Well, cool. Very cool.
Yeah. As far as kids, because I think you asked me about that and I was telling you about play, but their bodies, generally speaking, start from a little bit more of a pure beginning. And so if you get some of these intentions and these ideas in there early enough, by the time they're older, they're just moving that way rather than thinking about how to do it. And sometimes as an adult, you get so stuck in the way you move through life that undoing that, unwinding that is a little more challenging.
Yeah.
And so what you lack in being able to explain something to a kid, you kind of get a little head start because they're a little less messed up usually.
And sometimes we tend to have a rigid mind that'll give you a bit of a rigid body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, because I imagine you do a lot of education. I do a lot of education.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of understanding principles and understanding these whole things about health is more, we're trying to make certain that you can adapt to the situations that come along. Certainly not everybody you train is going to go into professional ballet.
No.
But there's no doubt that those little things, as you just said, if we can instill that in people to understand how to move throughout life, that's just going to open up more and more doors, not physically necessarily, but if you have the flexibility of body, then will you have the flexibility of mind? Will you be able to learn greater? Will you be able to sort of interact in a wider range of styles? Yeah. So that'd be cool.
Heck yeah.
So there you go. That's
Gyrotonic. Gotta try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raisa, do you have anything to add?
Good.
Come on.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, sit.
Join us.
Well, I was wondering, so for the first time we took you guys today through this type of unusual type of workout, and what was your actually experience and what were your how did you feel after you were done, and how did you feel during the session, and what really stand out and what felt like it was really unique?
The first thing I did was I went, oh, I don't hold myself upright very well. And, and coming from a background understanding spinal biomechanics, we don't realize it's nice to have an outside observer to sort of guide you through, and you go, ooh,
big time.
Yeah, especially, keeping my skull off of my spine, not just my rib cage. So, and then feeling, you could really feel where you were tight. And the biggest thing that Brett did with me was my shoulder kept popping. And that's something I want to bring to some of my practices. He goes, oh, no, let's change the movement, because somewhere the mechanics are a little off.
And they'll be smoother until you can work your way from that starting point back out to where your real range is, even if it's just one side affected.
And it was so subtle. Now, it's not something that I could teach. I'd need a lot more training to get there, but certainly it's teachable, and there's all these little pieces to bring in. But I had a couple of different things that went through my mind while I was doing it. Is number one, as a chiropractor, I go, wow, the mobility of the spine, because I certainly preach motion, mobility of the spine, because that flexibility, that adaptive ability
Mhm.
to be there,
Yeah.
and to have that, and just as we were saying, in business you want to be able to adapt, in relationships, and because weird stuff comes up, and you can't prepare for all of it. You can only prepare yourself internally to adapt to it, which is
Right.
part of a chiropractic principle.
Mm.
But the same thing as I thought, gosh, the little, to study the little pieces of the body. I think I brought up to you that I go, God, it'd be so great for actors that are studying movement
Mhm.
to understand all those little pieces of motion and the control. So I think when I see people that are really sick, one of the things that I get told is they go, it just kind of feels like everything's a little out of control. I can't control my pain. I can't control my sleep. I'm sick. And so we remove interference to get you back to that control. But the gyrotonic brought back and said, "Ooh, here's how I can be in control. Here's how I am out of control," and
Mhm.
sort of solidified that. Because an actor, and I
That's
have an
very
acting
interesting.
background,
Yeah.
is that to have control over your body and your body's motions to portray a
Mhm.
character type.
Mhm.
That would be good in the Commedia dell'arte. They got
Big
masks.
time.
And
And that's
that was
where
all
ballet
body.
began, by the way.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
we've got all these common pieces, but there's so much, and I have many chiropractic friends that were in the theater, that were in
Mhm.
acting, that were dancers.
Yeah.
And of course we ballroom dance. So those little pieces went through, and then it always comes back where I teach people, I go, we have two skeletons, an axial and an appendicular.
Mhm.
And the axial, having that axis, you never bend your axis
Mhm.
to move. And even though we did bending motions, it was
Right.
more, how do you have that full fluidity, that
Yeah.
adaptive fluidity? So that was a lot of the stuff that sort of went through me while I was doing it.
Mm.
And then I was shocked at the very subtle little locks that I didn't know were there.
Mhm.
And after we did 4 or 5 reps, very specifically with breath, you went, wow. Much more specific than yoga even,
Mhm.
which
With
we've
the
done.
breathing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The yoga's got great breathing, but it's tends to be a little less three-dimensional.
Mhm.
And there's lots of breathing in gyrotonic. And I think actually for me, that was one of the most fascinating things, to see how we have to go uh, as we go through our progressions. If we apply different breath and we do double breath, sniffing breath, um, breath with a sigh of satisfaction, there's so much,
Or different
so
tones.
different
right?
tone. There's
That's true.
ha, and then there's ho. So you have to go through and really when you see the variety of the breath that also comes together with the movement, to me it feels like that's actually something that really unlocks it,
Mhm.
right? And the breath really start guiding the movement, where you start really being more aware, so it brings you into that presence in a sense. So I feel like gyrotonic does, through breath, it really brings you to the present moment, which is something that I feel like is very unique. And that's the center in your spine, and like you said, how we have to hold ourselves there. I feel like what bought me there, after a few gyrotonic sessions, I adjusted the mirror to sit after I was done with my
Wow.
session.
Mhm.
I couldn't see, so I had to sit, and then I thought, wow, that worked. So whatever, I mean, in 2 hours, I probably went down again, but like you felt that. And I felt like that's one of the main characteristics of gyrotonic that
Yeah.
are pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, you're both very inspired by it. And
We
that
are.
comes through, because and then you're just talking about breath.
Mhm.
And of course that the Latin word for breathing is to spirare.
Mhm.
And so respirare, respirate, but inspirare was to take that breath in, to fill your body with life. And so
Right.
inspiration, and to be inspired is to sort of be filled with that, really, with that life
That's
that
very
projects out.
Mhm.
And so it's very, and I think when you see so many of these healing techniques, not all chiropractors do it, but certainly many will add the breath in there,
Mhm.
Yeah.
to have that inspiration. Because to be fair, I mean, life, it involves breathing.
Requires.
Yes,
Yeah, at
absolutely. And
least
that's something we
terrestrial
naturally
life.
do, right? But we, like, how much time do we pay attention? It's very interesting when you have that short exhalation, like I said, that it's like what the state of mind you're in, or the long, but then being able to control and dance with it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the coolest part, you get to dance with it.
And I would say the breath and the rhythm and a little bit sometimes the complication of the movement, because there's so many vectors going on,
Right.
are there to bring you back to the moment so that you can be present with what's going on. Because if
Right.
you're not going to be doing all the three different things we're asking you to do at the same time. It's kind of like when you're playing the piano, you got the two hands doing different
Oh
things,
yeah.
but you got three different things happening. You're breathing, you're moving, and you're thinking about the choreography.
Right. There's no
Because you
doubt.
got to be in advance of that,
Yeah.
especially if you're really making people move on a rhythm. And today, of course, we went a lot slower so that we could go
Certainly,
through all those
certainly.
positions, but ultimately you build up to a rhythm that allows even more opening, even if the specific movement isn't as clean. You're still getting a lot out of just
Right.
doing the reps over and over and over.
And of course, you had me doing, it was arms, and now do this with your feet. You've got to keep your spine moving. And so
Right.
there is a very three dimensionality, but there's no point either where you can have one part of the body isolated,
Right.
because the whole thing is
It's
such a
harmony.
dynamic thing.
Yeah.
that-
Even when you're seated and doing the arms, right?
Right.
I kept telling you to push through the floor so that you had
And that, of course,
an
to make it
elevation.
easier, do this with your legs. That's going to bring you up. That's going to allow the pelvis to tilt.
Right.
And just getting into that posture as we move through, and getting the rib cage to turn. There's so many pieces to it, but through it all, there is unifying it, that breath, that tonicity, that tensegral structure. And again, we go through, we all know the 7 areas of life that we just kind of work through, and
Right.
you can see it through there, and it'll bring out some people I imagine you've talked to that they do come for almost a spiritual release. They do come to go into a meditative place.
They do.
Or they come, and some people might use it for a bit of therapy while they're trying to work through, I've had issues with my wife, so I'm going to get my body to move it. I'm going to bring myself into harmony.
Yeah.
Because I can't control that,
Right.
but I can control me.
Right.
Or I'm having, a hard time starting my business, or, with an entrepreneur, for instance. What a beautiful thing to just focus on your individual health and your body to make certain you can adapt and deal with the challenges.
Absolutely. And I think quite often actually like working with people, you deal with them coming in frustrated, and even if it's like elderly people or
frenzied or something.
yeah.
Right?
So
Mhm.
we all get through life and trying to run through it, and it gets chaotic. And then when people walk in and they take a few of those breaths and they start moving, you can see the calmness. You can see that in the face. You can see it in the posture. And then, at the end, when you kind of have that, that feels better. So that feels very satisfying, I feel like. And it really shows the result of what it does, right? So it
almost
kinda
like they
shows
walk
that.
in like,
Right.
but by the end they can.
Right.
Well, and usually there's a yawn involved.
Oh yeah,
Because I
there
think
was
there was a
today.
yawn that was going on. And so part of that is like the parasympathetic turning on
Yeah.
and allowing the relaxation, even though there's a pressure.
Well, and there's
So-
that balance again, isn't there?
Right. And we talked about how you want to have a movement in a position, but it can't be rigid. It's got to be kind of a soft
Yeah.
reach.
I always move it, and soften that sternum, right?
Exactly.
It seems like a very rigid bone, but
Mhm.
we don't realize there's 3 bones there.
Mhm.
And in a newborn, there's certainly a lot of fluidity. We do have to become more rigid as we age, because that's part of adapting to the
Exactly.
pressure of gravity and everything. But at the same time, that flexibility is there.
Mhm.
Right.
Most people don't know that I do small adjustments even to the skull bones, because there's a slight breathing that goes on. But yeah, you bring up parasympathetic, sympathetic. I mean, talk about making sure we're in harmony.
Right. And if you're coming in and fight or flight, we kind of want to get you to a little bit somewhere in the middle end, or into a place where you're yawning and hungry. And
and you're just not going to be able to adapt well to the world when you're in that state.
Right.
And it's interesting how through movement, when you think about moving, you don't think about rest and digest necessarily. But sometimes when you can go through a variation of gyrotonic that could be so much more healing and oriented on just calming. And then there's also a piece to it that could be really intense. Let's train and let's really go.
Borderline gymnastics. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
can
But
get
with-
really extreme and you can get really competitive. Is how far you want to take it. But to me, it's also, that's another beautiful spectrum of how easy and calm that could be, and almost like
Right.
meditative, and take it all the way to the
And in theory, even when you're doing the most extreme things, you're connected. at the same time. You're not just throwing yourself into this stuff. It's the
Yeah.
same connection you have when we're just doing an elevation up and down to teach narrowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, taking that control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously you can still come in. You don't have to have a high fitness level.
No.
I mean, you're going to develop that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
So-
teach those who are 6 years old, I think was our
Mhm,
youngest.
6, yeah.
And 80.
I mean, I taught Uncle Bob's. He was
Yes,
in
and
his
he was
90s.
90s.
There you
so
go.
we were
That's
thinking-
inspiring.
Yeah.
That's a good, yes. And
Yeah.
he actually enjoyed and walked straight after that,
Yeah,
which was
exactly.
also a big marker for
Yeah.
him. for
That's
sure.
beautiful. Yeah, I mean, you just so that whole, I love the words, the gyrotonic, the gyrokinesis,
Mhm.
the whole sort of principle behind all that, and just now we can see if we talk it through how it applies so much throughout life.
Right.
What they
Um,
call it is the art of exercise
Art
and
of
beyond.
exercise and
I
beyond.
love that. Anytime
Yeah.
you get into an art, the way I view art is more because we have an art of, oh, we're out of camera.
Oh, because the battery.
The value.
So now we're still recording. So we're
Uh-oh.
going to go switch on you guys here.
Sure.
We hope. There we go.
Ah.
So
Oh, we still got
pardon the
audio.
interruption.
Yeah,
So we're
that's
still recording. We still got some audio. We killed the camera battery. So we're going to figure this out. And but that whole, where were we before the camera died? So
Have to check
we
the
were in a
video.
good
Yeah,
good
we-
place there. So, but the main thing that while we're talking
It's-
about that and
Right.
getting into these principles of balance and
Mhm.
balancing out throughout life, we killed it.
There we go.
And that's the beauty of having raw footage, which I don't like to edit my footage, so it makes it a
Yeah.
little more real.
It's
I
right.
love having these discussions. But yeah, just that whole idea of kinesis, of tonicity, and just having that flexibility, and at the same time that sort of
Functionality.
strong
Yeah.
groundedness
Mhm.
that's in there
Yeah.
is just one of those beautiful things that we can go through.
Right. And the
So-
functionality, just like you said before, it's the functionality and how it applies in life. And that's another thing that I feel like is very useful, which is why this is pre-activity for some, whatever activity that whether it's tennis, whether it's getting through life, whether it's, ballroom dancing, ballet dancing, you can help your body. Just you need to get connected with it, right? Before you can go and do extreme things. And I think this is just such a great first step of like teaching basically your relationship to your body and being aware of where you are in space
Very much
in
so.
order to then go and take on bigger heights and ski down
Whatever the
hills,
major
whatever
goal
it
is.
is.
So-
Exactly.
we were on art.
Art.
So those
Exactly.
right arts,
Art of-
right? So
That's right.
yeah, so in chiropractic, we have an art of adjusting. It's
Right.
part of our triangle,
Mhm.
a philosophy, a science, and an art. And then,
Yep.
the art of exercise, and we're, there's obviously a philosophy, a science, and an art behind
And the
it.
beyond part is this kind of spiritual connection you
far
can
you need to
find,
get.
Right.
when you're really deep in the
Yeah.
work and
Right.
everything else is zoned out, very much like the breakthrough experience in a way.
No, yeah,
It'll-
yeah.
it'll
Or
all
first
just all the way.
ballet. When
Right.
you dance and you're so present, the light, you don't see the audience, you don't see the
Right.
light, you're
there.
there in that moment. And it's the same with breakthrough. It's the same with when you really get into the breath and the movement and you dance with these machines. So it's, I think, taking us to that state of presence, which is beautiful when the exercise system could take you into that state of presence where you could be your most center self.
Maximize
Well, I
that
think we
potential.
talk about that, and there's people that talk about the idea of like flow, of being in that zone and stuff, and you get there, but
Mhm.
that idea of art is so much deeper. Where like the artist is a creator,
Mhm.
and the artist is somebody that's working to take their ability to a certain level and bring it there. So when we have the art of exercise, so can you make exercise not just a grind, but can you
Mhm.
turn it into a piece of creation? In
Right.
chiropractic, can we have our adjusting skill to such an art that we can go in there so smoothly and effortlessly and work on many different body types and spines, or the art of business, the art of
Mhm.
relationships, the art, so many things,
So,
and
yeah.
not just the painting and the drawing, but I find that skill just kind of goes naturally with it.
Mhm.
I mean,
you
I
know,
kind of
we're
feel
all
like,
theatrical here.
and I think art implies beauty in
Yeah.
some way, even if it's an ugly thing that's an art piece, but there's a beautiful nature to it in one way or another, or it's not being created in the
Somebody
name of
put
art.
all that right,
Right.
put all that effort into it. So, yeah, so getting it, you know, so we've got great names for it. So what have we covered today? We've covered, you know, breath, we've covered art, we've covered, you know, the idea of tensegrity,
Yeah.
going through spiritual and business and family, and even your social life, you
Yeah.
have that, you know, finances and everything, and just, you know, all these different principles, and we can see really how it all applies in there. And then I can bring that back to my practice, my internal stuff when I'm talking to different people, speaking, when we're talking about human potential, we have now another base to work off of.
Mhm.
And then even in chiropractic, I can bring, you know, greater understanding of the spine. So thank you, guys.
Yeah. Happy to share it with you.
Yeah, no,
And thanks for coming out.
yeah, no,
That's
we're
cool.
beautiful.
It's truly a pleasure to have someone who knows so much about the body on so many different levels to experience that and find it valuable.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming so far to enjoy the benefits that it has to offer and give us your feedback, which is also extremely valuable. That helps us get, you know, like have another piece of information and help people you know, experience that in a different level and realize how much more there is to it for each of us with our individual backgrounds. So thank you
Oh,
for
beautiful.
yeah.
So this is Dr. Kyle Hulsebus. I'm with Brett and Raisa Bauer, and they are gyrotonic teachers and ballet teachers. And I'm Dr. Kyle, and I just want to say it's yours in health. Health is within, and this is how we get farther on our path to mastery. Thank you.